Hello. Today we're going to be taking a look at PBS Game Show. Perhaps you've heard of it. Probably not. Now, when I say PBS Game Show, I really mean PBS. Public Broadcasting Service. The one that gets 15% of its budget from the government, the taxpayer. So yeah, this train wreck of a channel is an experiment that we can thank the taxpayer for. Hooray. PBS Game Show was about games, but a lot of the times, instead of being so much about games, they would delve into the fields of games and culture and social justice. We're talking Anita Sarkeesian levels of ridiculousness. He's a self-proclaimed feminist, our host. We'll get to him in just a moment, but they had some videos that were titled things like, Portal is a feminist masterpiece. Are games culturally insensitive? Thoughts on The Witcher 3 and race, which is what I'll get to in a moment. How I became a video game feminist. And why are NPCs still racist? The hostess of PBS Game Show is Jammin Warren. He likes to remind you that he is indeed biracial, and he's also the founder of Killscreen. Killscreen is the definitive source for independent games and culture writing. You can tell they're super cultured because they think that the election of Donald Trump literally means the fall of our republic. And showing again how progressive they are, they understand that diversity of ideas isn't what's important, it's diversity of skin color. Jammin himself also has a Twitter. You can see his channel art here depicts him and his many fans. Now, if you go to the channel on YouTube, you'll find they haven't uploaded anything in a while because their little experiment of sort got canceled or it stopped or I don't know why. It's over. The channel is still there. You can still view the videos. You see, they uploaded Thanks for Watching a while back, and that was the last thing they did. It's done. It's over. The top comment is, Thanks for making gaming worse. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. That doesn't speak volumes. Let's keep going, and nothing of value was lost that day. The only thing I'll miss about this channel is the great videos of people debunking your terrible thought-out drivel. Well, Maverick, it's your lucky day. Top Hats and Champagne says, bye. And the gaming world became one tiny iota better. And I agree, this channel was cancer. As oneangrygamer.net says, in the marketplace of free ideas, this particular experiment from PBS failed to provide the gaming community with the one commodity they appreciate more than anything else: honesty and common sense. Jammin Warren has none of these. Becoming an acolyte of the Church of Video Game Feminism and Social Justice requires of you to strip yourself of your common sense. You see, when it comes to PBS Game Show, we can see that there's a line here. There's smart and there's pretentious, and there's everything in between. The key is to be smart, not pretentious. Jammin Warren is incredibly pretentious. He's very holier than thou. If you go to his channel, you'll see exactly what I mean. He doesn't try to teach you or educate you. He actively talks down to you. Anyway, there's a little bit of background because this is my first time actually addressing PBS Game Show in these videos. But the video we're going to be looking at today is one that I knew I would eventually tackle. The video is Thoughts on The Witcher 3 and Race. And it's really kind of strange that we use The Witcher 3 here, because The Witcher 3 features many races in it. There are humans, there are elves, there are dwarves, there are halflings. Even the protagonist, Geralt of Rivia, is a Witcher. He's constantly derided by the general populace as a freak, a mutant. But let's take a look at just what Jammin Warren, whatever his name is, has to say about The Witcher 3 and race. A game that teaches us a lot about race and tackles the issues of race in fantastic ways because it shows that everybody has the capacity, no matter who you are and where you're from, everyone has the capacity to be terrible and to be wonderful to one another.
Hey everybody, Jamin here from Game Show. So you've probably heard this week or over the last week rather, there's been a bit of a controversy surrounding The Witcher 3.
If you care about race, or if you are a racist, whenever you play a video game or watch a movie or read a book, if something that comes to your mind is, gosh, there are not a certain amount of people of this skin color, then those are the only people this controversy, quote-unquote controversy, affected. Because to normal people, this is a non-issue. Normal people, when they play a game made by a bunch of Polish dudes, that was based on a book written by a Polish dude about Polish culture and literature and mythology and folklore, they will obviously say, of course, it's a bunch of white people. Because duh. This should not require any explanation. Just like you should not have to explain why there are no white people in Egyptian mythology. This is only a problem for people who are going out and looking for problems.
A critically lauded fantasy RPG that's opened to huge sales numbers, but it's also been open to criticism about how its characters lack diversity.
And what is so telling about Jamin here is how he glosses over that so quickly and does not instantly say, by the way, this is a bollocks controversy, because The Witcher 3, one of its greatest aspects, is that it does have an extremely diverse array of characters that you fight, meet, befriend, and see. You talk to kings and emperors. You talk to lowly peasants. You talk to witches and witch hunters. You speak with people of every economic background and class that can be possibly offered by society. You speak to everyone on the totem pole here. A massive part of the game is going to Skellige and being immersed, but bombarded by their culture and having to operate within those parameters for a lot of the story's elements. You talk to dwarves, you talk to elves, you talk to people of every walk of life with their own ambitions and their own concerns. The Witcher 3 has an extremely diverse cast of characters. Unless you're like Jamin, and that diversity only means the diversity of skin color.
So a lot of this comes from Polygon, who ran a very seriously hot take pointing out that there's not a single person of color in the game. Everyone's Caucasian, aside from the monsters, of course.
Well, generally, it's just a good idea to ignore Polygon, and it is some of the most disingenuous, dishonest, and ridiculous kind of journalism that we don't need in gaming. Nay, we don't need on the Earth. Remember, Polygon is the website that gave a 5 out of 10 to Shadow Warrior 2 because the reviewer didn't like the jokes. They're transphobic and sexist.
And so this resulted in a much larger conversation that's obviously been happening for quite some time about representation in games.
And again, this is a quote-unquote problem that's only being brought up by people who see the world through the lens of skin color. There are some times where the race of a person portraying a role or portraying a character in some work of fiction or nonfiction can be an issue or can be cause for concern, but The Witcher 3 is not one of those cases. Not by a long shot, in fact.
But more specifically, representation in a game like The Witcher itself. So the debate ends up being split. There's a dichotomy of people on two different sides. There's people who are defending it, and then people who are condemning it.
Yeah, but don't play this up like it's half of the people are over here and half of the people are over here. Again, this is only an issue that's brought up by people who are trying to invent problems where none exist because they feel like other people's creative visions should cater to their own personal fifis. The discussion on the race in The Witcher 3 appeals only to those of an authoritarian mindset who feel like they should be able to control other people to put things into games that they feel should be there, whether they belong there or not, or whether they make even any sense to be there.
And so this raises this question, what do we really mean when we talk about diversity? And I feel like The Witcher is a really good test case to discuss this, at least a little bit. All right, so let's take a closer look at the two different camps. On the one hand, when we talk about diversity, let's say these are like the pro-diversity folks in this instance.
No. They are not pro-diversity. They are pro-diversity of skin color. Because again, as anyone who's played The Witcher 3 can tell you, the characters in that game are insanely diverse, just not in skin color, which really should be about the least important characteristics of a person.
When we talk about diversity, we're usually talking about ethnic diversity, where all people are equal and therefore should be represented equally in media.
But all ethnicities are not equal. Genders are not equal. Cultures are not equal. There are, because of human nature, because of biology, because of the way we think, there are inequalities between different people. A tall person and a short person are not equal. They should all be treated fairly. Every individual should have justice done unto them. But unless your video game literally has the exact same number of people from all cultures, then this isn't a discussion you really should be having if you're talking about true equality.
Games should be diverse, and so many people say that Witcher 3 is endemic of a problem that games have with inclusivity, a cause that I am, of course, very sympathetic to.
Oh, we can tell from your other videos, Jamin, and I wouldn't be too against the idea that that's one of the reasons why PBS Game Show as a YouTube channel is not still currently producing content. It's not an accident that gamers are happy your channel doesn't make videos anymore. That wasn't an accident.
Done lots of different episodes on it.
Yeah, that video sucked. Just like pretty much every episode from you sucks when you talk about things like this. The top comment on that video does a really good job of explaining it. I don't get the over-obsession you people have with race. You're actively degenerating the progress that has been made over the last decades in that matter by using racism as a BS argument in any given opportunity. By downplaying ethnic characters in games and shoehorning them into your absurd narrative, it appears as if you yourself have a strong racial prejudice and try to blame it on the medium that invoked this feeling in you. In that video, you said Resident Evil 5 is the gold standard in racism against NPCs because God forbid you go to Africa and there are a lot of black people there. Because to Jamin, remember, if you go to Africa and you shoot enemies, and of course the enemies are all black because you're in Africa, that's racist. Which is why your channel's a joke, and I'm not going to shed a tear that it's not producing content anymore. Real gamers treat you just like they treat Sarkeesian.
Maybe too many episodes for some folks, but I feel like we talk about it in a regular amount because it's an important issue to talk about.
It isn't at all.
But the TLDR version is that the games there's a dearth of diversity, not just in how characters are represented, but who's making the games themselves.
Which is probably why you're so much in support of the Game Devs of Color Expo. Because again, diversity of ideas and the merit of people's skill and creativity, fuck that. It's all about what color your skin is. That's real diversity.
And as we've noted before, many characters of color are often pushed to the sideline as non-playable characters, where they're often stereotyped or they're cast in an unfavorable light as bad guys, or if there's just one person of color, you sort of like get one, one for the year or something like that. So on the other side, let's say it's like the pro-Witcher folks. On the other side, they're saying that that The Witcher is that series, that franchise, it's Polish, and claims that representation in The Witcher is historically accurate.
Yeah, because this just only makes sense in every possible way you look at it. Polish dudes who make a video game based on a book by a Polish guy about Polish folklore and mythology is all white. You don't exactly have to unfold the Laffy Taffy wrapper to get the answer for this one.
So games may have a diversity problem, they say, but The Witcher ostensibly isn't a part of it. So let's take a look outside of games for an answer. So diversity can also mean not just ethnic diversity, but also cultural diversity, where distinctive language and dress and customs are allowed to flourish, which is really, really great. And
yeah, but those clearly aren't nearly as important to you than the most superficial display of diversity imaginable, skin color, because The Witcher 3 has an incredibly diverse array of cultures, languages, blah, blah, blah. That's why you're harping on about this. That's why a bunch of virtue-signaling social justice busybodies are bitching about The Witcher 3 because there aren't enough brown people.
And The Witcher 3 was created, as I mentioned, in Poland as a fantasy work of 12th century Slavic culture. Many of the characters come from straight out of Polish folk tales like the Fish People, for example, or the main character is a Vedmak, or a male witch. In fact, the Polish people view this game as as a cultural product, something that can be shipped to the world as a demonstration of what it sort of means to be Polish. In fact, when President Obama, America's President Obama, visited Poland a few years ago, ago, the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, actually presented Obama with a copy of The Witcher 2.
Yeah, because Poland has great pride in one of their largest companies. In fact, CD Projekt is actually bigger than Capcom at this point. And they use The Witcher in the series, especially the explosion in sales that The Witcher 3 saw, as a way to show the world their culture. And I find it very strange, Jamin, that when you make videos like, oh, I don't know, which games are culturally insensitive, you also have a video like this which clearly show that a Polish company full of Polish pride that wants to show the world Polish folklore and culture should change the way that it represents itself and should change its own culture because it doesn't have enough brown people like you, Jamin. Do you understand how much of a fucking asshole that makes you look like, Jamin? Of course you don't. You don't have enough self-awareness to understand that what you are doing is the exact same thing you have railed on games for doing in the past. That's why I think you're a piece of shit, Jamin.
So here's the thing. Poland, their culture is overwhelmingly white, right?
Yeah. Why do you say that like it's a bad thing? Oh yeah, because to you that is a bad thing.
So the ethnic breakdown of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the 15th century was estimated at about 3.25 million Poles, 3.75 million Ruthenians, about 500,000 Lithuanians, but pretty much all, we would say, like white people. And even today, the largest non-white ethnic group in Poland is the Vietnamese, who make up less than 0.1% of the population.
Oh, and all those white Polish people? According to the European Values Survey, by 2008, the EVS showed Poland as one of the least xenophobic countries in Central and Eastern Europe, overcoming all the negatives that had affected Poland in this regard because of the Nazis and communism. So it would seem really unlikely to me that CD Projekt Red, when they made this video game, were thinking, you know what, we just don't like brown people, we're keeping them out of the game. Even though they were in the Hearts of Stone DLC. And surprise, surprise, they were dicks just like everyone else in The Witcher. It's almost like skin color doesn't change what kind of a person you are. Nah, that's crazy talk.
So in a sense, The Witcher is justified in being monographically white, but it does clash with this larger desire for games to have a very important role to play as far as ethnic diversity is concerned.
Well, it doesn't matter what people's desires may or may not be to you. They have the ability to make whatever creative thing they want to, regardless of that. They don't owe anybody anything. No, gamers just want good, fun games. Gamers just want good, fun games that don't cheat them out of money, that have fair business models. People just want to have fun when they play video games, alright? And that's something that The Witcher 3 does. The average normal human being isn't so race-focused like you are, Jamin. Hell, I think the only person out there who loves this game more than me is Black Bond on YouTube. He's black. I'm white. Asians play this game, and it doesn't matter who you are, because the game's about partaking in that world. It's about no matter who you are being absorbed, you are being immersed, you're being surrounded in the world of The Witcher.
Remember, this is not a game that's just being made for Poles, by Poles. It's a game that, is going to have a global audience. It's going to be, one of the most popular games this year, certainly one of the best reviewed games this year. So it does transcend this particular context in which it's made, which is why we're having a conversation about it.
No, this shouldn't even be a conversation that should happen. Because most people are sane and they have common sense and they're not looking at Polish games about Polish culture and wondering why there are no brown people. The reason we're having this discussion is because you and people like you are upset that they don't see the things that they want to see in a video game. So fuck other people's creativity. And if one other culture wants to show that culture to the world, if you don't personally like it, they should change it. Hell, in that video about which games are culturally insensitive, you actually have a small bit about The Witcher 3. Let's look at it.
Not in spite of it. Think of the big picture here. Embracing cultures outside of your own can only add to our overall experience.
Well, not if they're shitty, uninteresting cultures. There's a lot of aspects of a lot of different cultures that are horrible and awful. Female genital mutilation, forcing women to cover up, arranged marriages, actual patriarchies. Oppressive cultures are not worthy of our respect, and the world would be better without them.
Because play is one of those activities that transcends all our differences, video games are primed for being a particularly universal type of entertainment.
Weird, because that's also the perfect reason why you shouldn't fuck with them, Jamin.
Witcher 3, for example, is a distinctly Polish game, with Polish creators who take a deep dive into their culture's ancient and fascinating lore. Yet The Witcher 3 can be enjoyed by anyone, whether it's an audience in Europe, America, Asia, South America, wherever. And
Exactly! So don't fuck with it! Let them make the game they want to make. Let them make a game that shows to the world the intricacies, the magic of Polish folklore. And don't make them change their culture or the representation of their entire culture because you didn't think it had enough brown people in it.
What do I think? Well, unfortunately, I don't think either side has it quite right. So the pro-diversity folks are obviously, I think, maybe not quite so obviously, but the pro-diversity folks are dead on in a sense. If you're willing to believe that there's magic or dragons in 12th century Poland, then you can certainly believe that there are non-white folks there.
There are non-whites in the Witcher universe. They're in Zerrikania. And guess what? Zerrikania is a mysterious land located in the southeastern part of the continent. The northern kingdoms have very little to do with that realm, and the northern realms are where you play. Plus, with all the racism going around in the Witcher universe, it's not a big shocker that all the brownies don't want to come up north. They'll get hated on. In the Hearts of Stone expansion, you actually do get to see Zerrikanians. They were planned to be in the game. In fact, here's the rune right. And if people ever say there are no Zerrikanians in the base game, then obviously, they forgot this guy. This is a troll from Zerrikania. His name's Bart. In fact, the only Zerrikanian characters to appear in the Witcher series are Taya and Vea from the Bounds of Reason. And there is a Zerrikanian character in the first Witcher too. But really, why would you ever encounter Zerrikanians again? They're from this faraway land, in a world that is frothing at the mouth with peril. The roads are poor, and they are unguarded for the most part. Traveling is a dangerous proposition. In fact, it takes a prince being missing to bring the Zerrikanians to Novigrad. Novigrad's a city that you're in the Northern Kingdoms. I mean, it takes a prince, royalty, having to be fetched in order to get Zerrikanians to come to Novigrad. You don't just go out for a stroll. You don't just visit your auntie the next county over. That's not how it works in this world. The universe is full of danger. And danger is dangerous. Hell, you'll get mugged in the streets. There's no way you're going to make a journey like between the Northern Kingdoms and Zerrikania just half-heartedly. That's a big deal. That's a journey. It could take ages. It could be dangerous. You could be beset upon by bandits or griffins or other monsters. This isn't the modern ages where you can just take the train or buy a plane ticket or hop in your car and go to the next state over. There are obvious in-game reasons why you don't see foreigners from entire exotic lands. And then, of course, I have to bring up the obvious point, because when you say,
if you're willing to believe that there's magic or dragons in 12th century Poland, then you can certainly believe that there are non-white folks there.
A while back, I made a video about Battlefield 1 and how people wanted for there to be female soldiers as playable characters in this game. That takes place in World War I. Now, this should be self-evidently absolutely ridiculous to anyone who has even the tiniest iota of historical knowledge. And it is just patently absurd that anyone would suggest in a World War I game there should be the option to play as a female soldier fighting on the front lines, because there is a small select group of people who are so retarded they don't understand that not everything in a video game, not every concept, not every item, not every mechanic has the exact same level of believability. Jamin, you're one of those people, so I'm going to have to tell this to you. First off, we can all believe in a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty that when your soldier gets shot in the face and dies, you're going to come back to life and respawn and get to do it all over again. We can absolutely accept this as reality. We understand it's not real, but we can accept it. We can believe it. We can still immerse ourselves in these games, knowing that we are going to respawn soon and can do it all over again. We know even though this is not a realistic part of life, sorry Hindus, this is in every video game and we've come to accept it. It doesn't ruin our immersion. Let's take the Hellriegel SMG from Battlefield 1. In real life, the project in 1915 never got past its prototype phases. It never saw combat on the front lines, and it was never used extensively by any troops during the Great War. But it technically was period-specific, and it does have the look of a weapon you'd consider something to be period-specific. It looks like a World War I era gun. So even though it wasn't really used by troops, you can believe that it was an actual weapon that was in the war. You can totally believe it. It doesn't ruin immersion, even though you running around with it on the battlefield isn't historically accurate. The same thing goes in The Witcher 3. If you have a black person in The Witcher 3, there's going to have to be some explanation as to why are you there? How did you get here from wherever you were born? What's the story of how you came to be in this place? We can lose ourselves in a believable atmosphere of dragons and magic and all this stuff because one of the greatest assets of The Witcher 3 is that even though it's a fantasy setting, there are enough believable and relatable things about the universe that allows us to place ourselves there with ease. Either way, this really is a pretty piss-poor reason to have, well, anything in a game. If your argument for something is, well, it wouldn't ruin the immersion, maybe you should come up with better ideas? And I'm sorry, Jamin, but do you and the people who signed with diversity, maybe they should write a letter to CD Projekt Red and say that they didn't depict Polish folklore quite the right way. You gonna be the one to write that letter, Jamin? Nah, you're not. You don't have the balls.
At all. I'm very sympathetic to the idea that, like, if you're making the argument that the reason why so many white people in a game like The Witcher is because it has to be historically accurate, you then throw that out the window once you introduce these sort of historically inaccurate moments, whether it could be NPC dialogue or whatever it might be.
The game doesn't necessarily draw itself from Polish history as it does Poland's history of their own folklore and the mythologies therein. And since the game was released in modern times, it should actually lose some historical accuracy to actually immerse us even more in the world. All the characters speak English, for instance, and use modern terminologies. Of course, this isn't historically accurate, but it is immersive. It more easily removes a barrier between us and understanding everything that happens in the world. My favorite movie of all time is Masquerade. It's a 2012 movie that was directed by Chu Chang-min. It's a South Korean film, and all of the actors speak Korean. I can't understand it. I spent the whole time looking at subtitles when I had to understand things, and even though the movie is my favorite of all time and it's excellent in almost every way, it does sort of bring you out of it when you have to read what people are saying instead of just listening to them. It loses that little bit of immersion in it because it's being historically accurate and because it's a South Korean movie, they're speaking Korean. If we're going to be accurate to Poland's folklore, then having dragons in it would not be inaccurate, but having dark-skinned characters everywhere would be, contrary to what you believe.
I think it's important to recognize that every narrative decision is a choice. So that means choosing not to have a certain type of people in the game, that's a choice as well.
No, they chose to be accurate as they could to their own folklore. And again, it was their intention all along to have dark-skinned characters in because Zeracanians do make an appearance in the DLC, which makes attaching a motive to what CD Projekt Red did in this video extremely presumptuous. And you kind of look like an asshole for doing it now.
Fantasy sort of uses this as a cop-out all the time, and so it often uses its identity or its position as fantasy or this idea that, like, hey, it's not real, as an excuse not to create more racially diverse universes, even though they ask you to sort of like throw reality to the wind, and that's part of building a universe.
You're saying all this as if the game developers have some sort of an unspoken obligation to have this level of racial diversity that makes you feel better regardless of what their creative vision is. It's not a cop-out. They have no obligation. Nobody does. And diversity for the sake of diversity is tokenism. And it's the universes and worlds that we see in movies and books and video games that don't make us have to throw reality out the window that allow us to be the most immersed in them. There are enough realistic and believable and historically accurate aspects to the world of The Witcher 3 that allow us to be pulled into the world. And when we see a dragon while we're walking around, we accept it as reality. That's the whole point. You are playing in a world where you see dragons and you see monsters out and about, and it's your job to kill them. You don't say, well, that could never happen. That's not real. No. The world convinces you that it is real, that it is part of the world. And when you're engrossed in a video game and you see these things, your first thought isn't one of incredulity. It's one of, this is a task that I have to overcome. Because this is a real problem in this world that I have to solve.
But the problem is that The Witcher isn't that game. In terms of a lot of the games that I often complain about, I don't feel like The Witcher is one of those. For one, it's obviously well received by critics. It's a cultural product, as I explained, and it has a rationale for the preponderance of white characters. That's something that you very rarely find in video games, where you have a lot of different white characters, and you might say, you know, there's not a particular reason. It's just kind of like the decision of the game designers to make that sort of happen.
Jamin, we know that your attitudes on these kinds of subjects, it's no secret. We know exactly what you really want. So you can try to appear to take the middle ground in some of these circumstances, even though if you really did that, you wouldn't disingenuously throw out these ridiculous reasons that even you say have so much merit to them. You would love it if other cultures went out of their way to give you something you want to see.
So the pro-Witcher folks, they have a really strong case, but I think it's important to remember, because I think it's really important to remember that having all white characters does not necessarily mean that there's a lack of diversity. There are different types of diversity, ethnic diversity, and there's obviously cultural diversity as well.
And yet here you are, bitching about skin color. Jamin, we can see right through you. Don't say when your channel is most known for you being completely off the rails in terms of race. Are games racist? He asks. He says probably. Games are probably racist. If you go into Resident Evil 5, where you're in Africa, and you shoot mostly black people, because it's Africa, yeah, that's racist. The fact that most playable characters are white, because God forbid, game developers represent the demographics of the people who play them, yep, it's fucking racist. You'll mention Michael and Trevor in GTA 5, but you won't mention Franklin, because we have to cherry pick the white characters to prove your little points. It's obvious from your content, Jamin. You have a problem with playable characters being white in video games, and that is not a hyperbole that I'm making. You should watch some of these videos. Chances are I will revisit them later on. I have a bunch saved. It is obvious that Jamin Warren, who likes to wear glasses without lenses in them, Jamin, you are the one with the race problem, because that is ultimately the biggest defining factor of characters in a game. You can try and say otherwise, but everything else that you have done in your YouTube career has said otherwise. And people might watch this video and say, hey Rags, see, he said this. I'm not concerned with what he says here, I'm concerned with what he says everywhere. When you talk about diversity from culture and ethnicity and all that stuff and how that's important too, but you make practically an infamous appearance online by making diversity of skin color the most important facet of one's actual character, which really is in direct contradiction to what MLK said. I've literally seen articles from people writing about how as they play The Witcher 3, that it's a problem because all the reviewers are white. Look here, Paul Tassi. Yes, I'm colorblind about The Witcher 3, and yes, that's a problem. It's a problem to not think of people's race. That's bad. It's bad to not take people's race into consideration. I mean, fuck their character, the things they say, the actions they take. No, it's not about that. It's about their skin tone. It's about their skin tone. Look at what he says. I'm also racially colorblind at times. Something I'm coming to realize should not be a bragging point. This is what social justice will do to you, and this is what it will do to your video games, and this is what it will do if you allow this to poison your attitude on what is otherwise something that you should be thinking. You shouldn't care about skin tone, because it's superficial. It's completely superficial, and it has nothing to do on the decisions people make. He writes, I have the ability to play through The Witcher 3 without thinking once about race because my entire life has been full of stories made up almost entirely of white people who look just like me. Okay, first off, that's kind of fucking racist to say that all white people look like you. And the reason that most of the stories in your culture are predominantly white is because you live in a predominantly white culture. Guess what? In Egyptian mythology, it's got a bunch of Egyptians in it. If you go to China, Chinese mythology has a lot of Asians in it. Of course, this point is kind of moot here because you live in a culture where blacks are famous singers and songwriters, musicians, actors and actresses, where anybody can become a star, where anybody can partake in culture. You can come to America, it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter what you look like. If you have talent, if you produce something that people like, you can make it big and you could be famous and you can be part of the popular culture. You're someone who's not a racist, who is reading this stuff, and you're being guilt-tripped, or you're being tricked, or you're being misled into thinking that you are a racist. The fact that you played The Witcher 3 without thinking once about race, that's the point. That is the point. That's the idea. It's not, race isn't an issue when it comes to skin color. There are different races in The Witcher 3. There are the dwarves and the elves, and then there's humans, and there's everything in between. But oh, it's about what people look like. Even though you don't share a culture with anybody in this game. A black Tariq Musa. This is the article that you saw at the beginning of the video and the pause of the Jamin Warren video. And this is the article that is referenced by Paul. This is an example of how ludicrous gaming journalism is and why it's just cancerous. Okay? Colorblind on The Witcher 3, Rust, and gaming's race problem. Because let me sum up Tariq Musa. Tariq Musa is a massive racist. You see, race bothers him a lot. He's bothered that the reviewers for The Witcher 3 have been mostly white. This legitimately bothers him. He is a racist. Tariq, if you read this, if you listen to this, in front of tens of thousands of people, I am looking at you and I'm calling you a racist because you think it's a problem that the reviewers of The Witcher 3 are white. I'm not trying to mince my words here. I'm trying to be as direct as I possibly can be. And what I think is so strange about Tariq and the way he looks at race is because he ties race with identity. This is, of course, absolutely ridiculous because it doesn't matter what your color is. You can have a huge variety of different cultures and histories, languages, backgrounds, folklores, and mythologies. But not to Tariq. To Tariq, race is the identity that he has to associate himself with. Last sentence here. Concerns of a minority group are not only ignored, they're so often not even considered. Because in The Witcher 3, he is only able to identify with characters, or be represented by characters, if the character has the same skin color as him. That's it. Let's look at a few uncomfortable facts. Almost every Witcher 3 review I came across was written by a white man. That's an uncomfortable fact for Tariq. That is an uncomfortable fact. Now, most of us might think, who cares what the color was of the person who reviewed it? Is it a fair review? Did they finish it? Did they play enough of it? Did they have bugs or hardware issues? Did they complete all the side quests? Did they represent the game fairly to the consumer? Did they not let their personal feelings about politics or things of that nature get in the way of how good the game is for its own merits? Those are the things that we might ask when someone writes a review. Those are the things that a gamer cares about when we read a review. Most people, when we read a review, we don't even look at who the author is. We don't look at their bio. We just read the review, and then we go on to the next one. We don't go through reviews and keep a mental checklist of, well, what was the gender and race of the person reviewing the game? And how did their race impact the review? Because, white people, right? They just can't review games the right way. You get too many white people reviewing games, and all of a sudden, they're misrepresenting games, and journalism in gaming is going to just go into the shitter because of all the white people in it. With their fucking anime and their kale chips. Now, as you can tell from this video so far, the predominant defense that I've been using, this doesn't even need to be defended, but I'm making a video on it, is that People are white in The Witcher because it's a bunch of Slavic dudes who have basically no other skin colors in their folklore or in their history, and so of course it's going to be all white people. Well, this defense bounces off Tariq Musa like a cannonball off the Merrimack. He is completely impervious to a normal person's reason. In the article, because Slavic people are predominantly white, it is therefore, in keeping with nods to that mythology, to only feature white people in the game's world, just as you would feature Indian people if you were making a game based on Indian mythology, so you would do the same for Slavic. But this misses a crucial point. Things are not equal. We are not in a medium that features predominantly Indian men. Chinese women are focuses on stories from Africa. That's because we're not in Africa, that's because we're not in India, and that's because we're not in China, Tariq. We're part of an industry that frequently tells the stories of white people and stars white people. I'm not going to bring up all the black stars in movies and in popular culture. We're not going to be talking about that. I mean, yeah, we elected a black president twice, and Beyonce and Will Smith are household names that everybody knows, but nope. He says, and this is what's so insane, because he can somehow pry things apart, because you can't just put a double standard on him. You can't expect him to abide by his own rules. You can't expect a person like Tariq to abide by his own logic. He explicitly states here, that's why whitewashing, casting a white actor to play a character of color, is not the same as race bending, casting a black actor to play a white character. Total and complete, obvious, blatant double standard. Because it's okay if my color does it, but it's not okay if your color does it. Which is, one would say that's kind of like the textbook definition of racism, isn't it? And most people would say, yeah, it kind of is. But no, not to Tariq. Because Tariq actually is a racist. And he's writing for Polygon, and they give him money because it's Polygon, and it's a joke of a website masquerading as journalism. You can even see it highlighted there on the left. Historically accurate is a common defense for awful actions in fiction. Because if a work of fiction tries to be historically accurate in immersive aspects, not having black people in The Witcher 3, it's an awful action. Not having Indians in The Witcher 3, awful. Are there Asians in The Witcher 3? No. And that's awful. It's awful. I mean, you could find these articles if you want. I've posted I've posted the names of these articles if you want to Google them, but holy fuck, it's just cancerous, man. This is what's wrong with video game journalism. That's why people like this are laughed at and scorned by the general populace. Because the general populace, they're not racists. And one of the things that shocks me so much about this attitude against The Witcher, of all things, is that The Witcher is a game that shows us all how terrible racism is. Humans and dwarves and humans, they don't exactly get along a lot of the times. The Witcher 2's plot, especially near the end, deals with the creation of a state for all races. And the Scoia'tael, the elves, are trying to create a nation for their people. Race is a huge factor in the stories that are featured in the Witcher series, especially 2 and 3. The game does not paint any one race as worse or better than the other. It teaches you, more than anything else concerning race, that you must judge each individual as an individual. That it's not what color they are that matters. It's not about their ethnicity that matters, their culture, their history. That doesn't matter. What matters is the things they say and the things they do. And you have to judge the people based on what they do, not things about them that they cannot change. You see, Tariq, I don't identify with Geralt of Rivia because he's white. I identify him because it is a role-playing game and I'm stepping into his shoes in an immersive world and I'm telling him what to do, what to say, and what decisions to make. I identify with him because I'm in control of him and I can shape the world in the way I want through him. It's not because he's white.
The problem is that, I think for the pro-Witcher folks, I don't necessarily believe that this is, I think the problem is that The Witcher is like the one game where this applies to. If you look at games like more broadly as a cultural form, they still really, really struggle with diversity. I think that it needs to be a part of the conversation.
This is not a problem. This is not an issue. And nothing bad will happen if this continues to keep going forward. Video games are full of diversity. It's just not the diversity that you want, because it's not the kind of diversity that you can instantly look at and see. That's why you complain about The Witcher 3 so much. That's why Tariq Musa complains about The Witcher 3 so much, because in your mind and in his mind, you can't connect or see yourself or be represented in a game just because skin color. Never mind the fact that everybody in The Witcher 3 has a different history and a different folklore and a different culture, different languages. No, it's not about that. It's about skin color. I'm represented in a game because skin color. Because I never think that, oh, I'm represented in The Witcher 3 because I'm a white guy. No, because no one in The Witcher 3 represents me. That's ridiculous. They're an entirely different people with a vast array of different folklores, histories, cultures, mythologies, languages, all that stuff. They don't represent me because they're white and I'm white. And that's some part of us that we cannot change about ourselves. And just like in the Hearts of Stone expansion for The Witcher 3, you do see Zerrikanians, and you see that they have brown skin. They don't represent people in reality with brown skin. These are completely different people. And if the way you identify yourself is primarily the level of melanin in your skin, you need to reevaluate yourself.
The thing is that The Witcher is 100% an exception to the rule, but the rule being is that we still have a problem in terms of there not being enough diversity in games. So
bullshit. I don't believe you for a second. Based on everything you've done in the past, I don't believe you for a second, and you are being disgustingly disingenuous here. I do not believe you. You can't say everything that you have said in this video and in other videos that you have done, and then try to say, oh yeah, The Witcher 3 gets a pass. Because we know that's not what you think. We know that's not what you think. Maybe somebody might believe you if this is the only video from you that you saw and they ignored half of the things you said in the first bit. But I'm not one of those people. If you truly mean right here that you're totally fine with having there be no people of color, and that's a stupid phrase too, because white people are people of color to non-whites. It's dumb. There's no default skin tone for humanity. Oh, it's such a stupid phrase. Anyway, if you're saying that you side totally with CD Projekt Red and their creative vision for their own culture and its representation, then that would go completely at odds with everything else that you've done. It would go completely against everything else. That's why I'm not willing to believe you. And that's why even in this video here, you give ridiculous arguments as to why the pro-diversity side has merit.
I think either side has some great points, but I don't necessarily think my position kind of lines up neatly with one side or the other. But you may feel differently, so I encourage you to hash it out in the comments, and I'll see you all next week.
So, there you go. PBS Game Show and Jamin Warren and Tariq Musa and Paul Tassi, whatever his name is. What I find so strange, though, about this whole conversation is this isn't something that real gamers care about. This isn't something about normal people care about. They don't focus on race in these ways. They don't look at skin color and see this as the predominant or identifying factor of who you are. They see The Witcher 3 as a game that tells us how bad racism is and to treat people as individuals, to judge people based on what they do and the things they say. But even CD Projekt Red, who wants to show the world through a video game their culture and their folklore and their histories, they can't even do that without people focusing on race.